good evening and welcome. Tonight, we're having an information forum for the BLM Southern Nevada District Mapping Restoration Opportunities. Please join this meeting using your computer audio, Let's get started. So tonight, we'll be using the following meeting ABCs, if you will. So as I said, please join the forum using computer audio. Your microphone mute and unmute will be controlled by our Zoom technician, that's Emma Davis. When we get to the question and answer period, you'll use the Q&A icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen during that time. And when we get to the public input period, you'll use your raise hand icon. If you have an urgent technical question, you can use the chat icon and you can chat directly with our Zoom technician, who again is Emma Davis. And if that's totally not working for you, you can call her and her number is right there. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. A video of this is going to be posted on BLM Nevada YouTube in a couple days. If you need to use closed caption, you can enable them by clicking live transcript button at the bottom of your Zoom toolbar and then select show subtitles. So for our forum agenda, we are going to introduce ourselves, and I am Marcia, since I'm talking. We are also going to talk about why is the BLM mapping restoration opportunities? How are we going to make this map? Some frequently asked questions that you might have, how you, the public, can get involved. What are the BLM's next steps? Then we'll go into a question and answer period. And then finally, we will have a public input period where you can give comments. Besides that public input period, we have a website which we'll display later on the slides, and you can provide written input there, and that input is due on April 8th. So now I'm going to turn the meeting over to Katrina Williams. Katrina is the field manager for Red Rock and Sloan Canyon field office, and she's going to give us some open remarks. Katrina?
Thanks, Marcia. Again, hello, everyone. My name is Katrina Williams, and I am the field manager for the Red Rock Sloan field office in the Bureau of Land Management, Southern Nevada District. I wanted to welcome you all today to this public information forum for mapping restoration opportunities for the Southern Nevada District restoration projects. Today, we will provide a brief presentation on the map that is being developed, which will help us to prioritize the restoration projects in our district. Restoration is very critical to ensuring the protection of the various and significant resources and habitat on the public lands within Southern Nevada District. I really appreciate everyone's interest and participation in tonight's forum, and we look forward to hearing from all of you with your questions and or comments. And the other managers that are listed on this slide also appreciate your interest. So with that, I will turn this presentation over to the Bureau of Land Management's project manager, Boris Poff. Thank you.
Thank you, Katrina. With me tonight is a team of BLM specialists and also EMPSI, a consultant helping us with this project. On our BLM team, we have myself, Boris Poff, and Jonathan Smith, goes by JJ, Tarl Norman, Corey Lang, Adam Johnson, Steve Leslie, and Kirsten Cannon. On our EMPSI team, we have Marsha Rickey, Rob Laviv, Ali Yamitsky, and Emma Davis. So why are we, the BLM, doing this? We believe that mapping restoration opportunities will help us to ensure that we, as a land managing agency, will be successful in identifying areas that are, first of all, that are important for conservation. Also, we are looking for areas that have existing disturbances. Otherwise, they wouldn't need restoration. And lastly, we want to make sure that the areas we identify for restoration don't have valid existing uses or proposed uses that would prevent restoration. Our restoration opportunity map will identify areas where restoration can maximize conservation outcomes and optimize the use of funds. To do this, our initial thoughts are that we will identify and map areas with high, medium, and low potential for restoration. And we would hopefully accomplish that by using our rather extensive and comprehensive set of BLM GIS data, as well as the experience of our BLM staff. In Southern Nevada, we collectively probably have over a century of experience. And of course, we will gladly look at any data that is submitted from government, tribes, stakeholders, and you, the public. The map here shows the study area, which includes BLM administered lands in Southern Nevada, except for the dry lakes in Amargosa Valley solar energy zones, the Southern Nevada Public Lands Management Disposal Boundary, and if you're from the area, you'll know it as the Sniplamont Disposal Boundary, as well as the Nellis Test and Training Range. For our restoration map, we so far have identified the many different GIS data sources listed here, which include the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's Threatened and Endangered Critical Habitat and BLM Sensitive Species Habitat, springs and riparian vegetation, upland vegetation cover, including invasive annual grasses and other weeds, special soil types such as biocrusts, wildlife corridors, areas of critical environmental concern, also known as ACECs, as well as national conservation lands, such as wilderness study areas, national conservation areas, and national monuments. We will also use GIS data sources for disturbances, such as roads, abandoned mines, existing right-of-ways, such as transmission lines or communication sites, solar fields or pending right-of-ways, wildfire areas, and areas with invasive grasses. We will compile these GIS data sets, compare the resource values versus disturbances. Then we will rank them as high, medium, or low for restoration opportunities and make a heat map of those ranks. I'm going to turn it over to JJ Smith now, who will describe examples of restoration and how this mapping effort will assist with prioritizing restoration projects.
Thanks, Boris. So I'm going to start with a brief example of our ongoing riparian restoration program to provide you with an idea of the types of mapping data and the decisions that go into restoration projects. And then I'll provide a couple of examples of how this mapping effort could help us prioritize restoration over the entire Southern Nevada district. So riparian forests are the vegetated areas that occur adjacent to streams, rivers, and springs. BLM manages a few hundred acres of riparian forest along the Virgin River that you see in this picture here. And over the past several decades, these forests have become dominated by invasive tamarisk, also called salt cedar. These invasive species have degraded the ecosystem, and they've contributed to the decline of several wildlife species, including the endangered southwestern willow flycatcher. So with a limited amount of funding, we needed to identify and prioritize areas where we could remove this tamarisk, this invasive species, and replant with native cottonwoods and willows. The question is, where can we do this restoration and have the highest likelihood of success? So in this example, we used existing GIS studies that map things like the content of the soil, the salt content of the soil. Some native plants like saltgrass are very well adapted to these conditions, but salty soils present a challenging environment for cottonwood and willow seedlings. We also used monitoring wells to find areas where groundwater is shallow enough for native species to reach the water. And we used a map of precise elevations to identify areas that are less prone to frequent flooding so that we could focus on areas where native seed higher chance to become established before encountering a major flood event. Other factors included the proximity to existing willow flycatcher habitat and whether we have an opportunity to use a restoration treatment to break up a continuous supply of fuels and help interrupt the spread of a wildfire in in this system. So overlaying GIS information like this from a range of sources can help us zero in on places that restoration work could give us the most bang for the buck. Now, identifying where we have restoration opportunities within an area of a few hundred acres, like in that riparian forest example, that's hard enough, but how do we do it for the millions of acres of the Southern Nevada district? In this second example, we know that habitat for species like the threatened Mojave Desert tortoise is becoming fragmented by roads, by development, other activities and land uses that cause disturbances, some of which you can see beneath this shading here. We also know that as wildlife populations become smaller and more isolated, they become increasingly susceptible to being wiped out by a single event, like a wildfire or a disease outbreak. The dark green areas of this map are from a model of what we think is important tortoise habitat. At the most basic level, what we want to do is overlay and combine these layers of habitat information. This is just one example for the desert tortoise with, and other species of concern, with disturbance data. Now, what this does is it allows us to look at areas like this moderately good tortoise habitat, or the good habitat in green, and the moderately good habitat in pink, and find areas where we have the best opportunity to reconnect or maintain the connectivity of patches of high quality desert tortoise habitat. Now, the type of disturbance is also important. We know that some of these disturbances, disturbed areas, have been converted to another land use. For example, solar energy that you can see beneath the shading. So these are not restorable in the short term. Other areas just may be moderately degraded, and those could be reconnected with restoration techniques like weed control or reintroducing native plant species. And finally, some of these areas may have had very little disturbance, and our focus here might be to do nothing or to make sure that we aren't doing things that increase the disturbance or the introduction of weeds or those sorts of things. Here's another example of how we might use this study to identify high value, intact portions of the landscape in relation to these moderately or severely disturbed areas, and to help us find these restoration opportunities. Now, earlier I mentioned how these contiguous stands of tamarisk along the Virgin River increase the risk of fire in riparian areas. Most of the Southern Nevada district is dominated by creosote bush, white bursage, Joshua tree, like you see in this photo, and other upland plant species. In a distant past, large wildfires were rare in this landscape. But over the past few decades, fires have become much more frequent and larger, due in part to the spread of invasive grasses. And these include red brome, cheatgrass, and Mediterranean grass. No one has yet discovered a silver bullet for dealing with these areas that are now prone to burning because of these invasive grasses. But by mapping areas that are more susceptible to grass-fueled fires, and then mapping areas of high value habitat, and then overlaying that information in GIS, we can use knowledge of things like prevailing wind direction, fire behavior, those sorts of things to design restoration treatments. So in this example, we have an area that has burned several times, each time becoming more and more dominated by these invasive grasses. At the moment, as I said, we don't have any good options for restoring these areas, especially large areas, because they're just too inaccessible and rugged for the tools and techniques we have available to us. But we may be able to contain the damage within the burned area by focusing weed control, restoration, fire prevention, and other activities along the edges of the burned area, adjacent to unburned, high value areas.
Sorry about that. Well, hey, thank you, JJ. And now I just briefly want to address a few frequently asked questions. We will use the study to find the best locations to focus restoration efforts. We are trying to determine where the highest value resources are, where the disturbances are, and where these two intersect. Again, the BLM will use the study to identify restoration opportunities. While this study does not amend or supplement current resource management plans, we may use the results of the study in future planning efforts. For more questions and answers, please look on our website that is listed here, the tiny URL. And we will also answer questions during our question and answer period here in a minute. So how can you get involved? Well, you may provide input verbally tonight. You may also submit a written comment or input to our website that is listed here. And if you have trouble with submitting comments, please send an email to the BLM_NV_SNDO_restoration map@BLM email address. Public input is due April 8th of this year, 2022. Public input that would be most helpful to the BLM is on-the-ground information about important conservation areas or about disturbed areas, either of which could be opportunities for restoration. These types of information, which will be most helpful for our study, include GIS data, Google Earth data, or spreadsheets with lat and longs of rare habitats, threatened and endangered or candidate species, or BLM-sensitive species, disturbed areas that could benefit from restoration. Input on which species or habitats should be ranked high, medium, or low for opportunities for restoration. For example, let's say you've noticed the area around your favorite mountain biking trail has become filled with annual grasses. You could report to us the trail location and the fact that it's filled with annual grasses. Then we could consider the area for restoration opportunities. Or perhaps you are a great botanist and have seen an area with rare plants that recently burned. Again, please let us know so that we can consider these areas for restoration opportunities as well. Examples of the type of input that will be less helpful for our study are input in favor or against the study or restoration in general, input on that only agrees or disagrees with BLM policy or previous NEPA decisions, input that does not pertain to the study. Right now, we are internally working on the GIS map of resources and disturbances. Any public input you'd like to submit is due April 8th. We will review and incorporate input into the restoration opportunity map as appropriate. We will create and finalize the restoration opportunity map this summer 2022. The map will be published on our website. Then we will host another meeting this summer to share the map results with the public. The BLM Southern Nevada District Office may use this map to prioritize future restoration projects. Restoration projects will be analyzed for the appropriate environmental analysis at the time that they are proposed. We anticipate that this is a dynamic map, which will change when, for example, desert habitat GIS layers is updated. Please note that the restoration opportunity map will not be a BLM decision. Instead, it may serve as a decision support tool. Ali will now start our question and answer period. Ali?
Thanks, Boris. So for the question and answer session this evening, we'll be using the Q&A icon. This feature is located at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and you might have to toggle your mouse around a little bit to get the toolbar to pop up. Once you have that open, you can go ahead and type your question into the Q&A box, and a specialist from the BLM will either answer your question live or type an answer back to the entire audience. Please remember to use the chat icon only for urgent technical questions, as we will not be able to respond to questions submitted there. We will answer questions as quickly as possible. However, it may take a few minutes for us to provide a reply. We'll do our best to answer all questions received this evening. However, if we are unable to answer everyone's questions, we will capture those unanswered questions and post the original questions with answers to the virtual public meeting website, along with the video recording of this evening's meeting. We are now accepting questions, so please go ahead and submit those questions through that Q&A box. We will take just a minute or so to begin gathering those answers, so we appreciate your patience with us. All right, so go ahead and submit those questions, and we'll get into the answer session in just a minute. All right, looks like we have our first question this evening. This question comes from Josh Wilson, and they ask, will the public get a chance to be a part of whatever the BLM decides is the best course of action? And I will go to Boris for the answer on that.
So the answer is basically yes. However, not in this process, because this is not a BLM decision. This is just a decision support tool. However, once the BLM will do any NEPA analysis on any proposed restoration efforts, the public will have a chance to provide input at that time.
Great, thanks for that. We also have another question. This comes from Diane, and they asked, our company has created native flower seed balls. We were looking for areas to distribute these seed balls to help regrow native flowering plants. All seeds were harvested in the valley directly from the plants. Is BLM interested, and how do we seek out areas? And I will go to JJ for that answer.
Thanks, Ali. And yeah, that's a good question. We definitely are interested in talking to anybody who's been working with techniques related to things like seed balls or seed pellets, or pelletizing seed in that way. It's an interesting technique that we would like to develop better for use for restoration projects. So yes, I would say we're interested. Let's talk about that offline. For this particular project, we're not as focused on developing individual restoration techniques, but more of just mapping opportunities across the district based on using these different data sources. So, but thank you very much for the question.
Great, and we do have another question from Josh Wilson, and that question is, can we sign up on an up-to-date list that will keep us informed? And I'll go back to Boris for the answer on that. All right, looks like Boris is scrapping together a response for that earlier question, so we'll circle back to that in a few minutes. In the meantime, we do have do you have an answer ready, Boris?
Sorry, I had my computer muted. I was like, what's going on? Sorry. So I assume you're asking what the question was, if we can add people to the list and for upcoming projects. And yes, and Josh has already been added for updates for this project.
Great, thanks. We'll move on to our next question, and that question comes from Shayna. And they asked, I believe you mentioned that solar sites would not be applicable for restoration. However, I know the BLM has been supporting the new mowing alternative on new solar sites to promote the preservation of desert soils, vegetation, and potentially the ability for desert tortoise to remain on site after construction. Would it be possible for restoration of solar sites before the end of their lifespan and then maintain them using the mowing alternative? And I will go to JJ for the answer on that one.
Yeah, thanks for the question. This is an interesting one, and we have done some research related to we're calling it sort of pre-storation or pre-restoration at these solar energy facilities. But for this particular project, I think we're really focused on identifying shorter term opportunities. It doesn't mean we're going to disregard areas that have a potential to be incorporated into sort of the more background natural matrix of the landscape. But they're not going to be the focus. And we do have some areas specifically that we're going to exclude that we mentioned earlier in the presentation, like the solar energy zone at this time. Again, this is it's going to be a living document that we could add or subtract things from down the road as well. Thank you.
Thanks for that response, JJ. We're going to give it just a few minutes here to gather some responses to some of the other questions that we have been submitted. All right, looks like we have a couple of questions, again from Josh Wilson, and he has two that relate to each other. And those are, can you quickly talk about these seed balls? And there should be a seed ball available for private property owners. And for the answers on those, we'll go back to JJ.
I can't talk too much about that. It's sort of out of scope for this particular project. I would suggest, Josh, that maybe you try to look around on Google and see if you can find any information on folks who are developing these products or the research associated with pelletizing seed for the use in restoration. Thanks.
All right, and again, we're just gathering some more answers to these questions. I know we still have a few in the queue ready, so again, please just be patient with us as we gather those responses. All right, looks like we have our next question. And this question is from Shayna, and they say, thank you very much for your answer. Is some of the restoration research and work available somewhere for public access? And I'll go to JJ for the answer on that.
So the research that I'm aware of that's going on related to this, I'm not sure if it's been published yet, but we can certainly look that up for you offline. If you could just reach out to us via the contact on this PowerPoint restoration, we'd be happy to look through it a little bit more and see if we can find out the status of that research or any other on this research on this question.
Right. Our next question comes from Peter, and they asked, does the BLM intend to use the identified restoration areas to inform priority determinations for new renewable energy project applications? For example, a proposed solar project could receive a lower priority determination for projects in areas with high restoration value, but it may also make sense to site projects in disturbed areas. And for a response, I'll go to Boris.
Yeah, that is a good question. So yes and no. It really it depends. It's very site specific, and hopefully we'll be able to determine that in this map. We have experimented, for example, restoring biocrust or other techniques to start restoration under solar panels and solar power plants, and so where the location and the soil conditions, for example, are good, then maybe we want to use something like mitigation funds to start restoration while a solar power plant is up and running. In other areas where conditions are not so favorable, maybe we do not want to spend any funds or time or efforts on restoration. So hopefully this map will help us to determine that as well. I hope I answered that question for you, Peter.
Thanks, Boris. We do have another question in the queue, and this question is, how can a big dam on the Virgin River actually help the fishes? And for the answer on that, we will go to JJ.
So I'm not sure that the restoration opportunity mapping project that we're working on now is going to directly affect where a barrier might be placed on the Virgin River, but I'm not 100% sure of that, so I'll answer the question this way. Fish barriers and the BLM and other agencies have some of these on the Muddy River, are used to help keep invasive species like tilapia, red shiner, mollies. These are species that were brought in from somewhere else and they're not native to the ecosystem. It's to keep them from migrating upstream into endangered fish habitat. So a barrier across a stream would serve that purpose.
Great. So that looks like all the questions that we have received so far. I will give it about a minute or so. If anybody wants to type in any more questions, feel free to go ahead and do so now. After about a minute or so, if we don't receive any, we'll go ahead and move on to our public input session where everybody will be able to provide input. All right, looks like we do have a few last minute questions. So this next one is, can invasive annual grasses really be managed? And for the answer on that, we'll go to JJ.
Very good question. The answer is, I hope so. I know that invasive grasses can be managed on a limited portion of the landscape. We do have tools available, including herbicides. New herbicide is being tested now to see if it will increase the efficacy or how well these herbicides, how long they last in the environment for managing these invasive grasses safely. Other than that, we have not that many tools available. I mean, native plants do compete with invasive grasses. So areas that have been burned, and we can replant with native plants. That does help compete with those. Limiting disturbance in areas that don't have a lot of grass is another technique that can be used. But I think the point to all of this, and then of course there's ongoing research for invasive plant management. I think the point is to find out where on the landscape efforts can be concentrated in a very small area to affect a much larger area by identifying, pinch points and areas that we can do a linear treatment or something to protect a much larger area and to keep in these invasive grasses out of areas where we don't have them now.
Great, thanks for that. We do have another question in the queue. We're just going to gather our response to that. So just bear with us for another minute or so. All right, so our next question comes from Shayna, and they asked, is the BLM considering additional protections on the lands that would be restored using this tool to ensure the investment in restoration is safeguarded from future degradation? And for the answer on that, I'll go to Boris.
So that's a very good question. The answer is actually no. This is not a decision document. This is a decision support tool. What will go into this map, though, is to identify areas that already have some sort of protection, such as ACECs or national conservation areas or national monuments. Those areas will be ranked higher because there is this additional protection for restoration action.
Great. So again, that kind of looks like the last of our questions that we currently have. I'll give it another minute or so. If you've got any last minute questions, feel free to pop them into that Q&A box and we'll do our best to answer them. Otherwise, we will go ahead and move on to our public input session. All right, and we do have a few last minute questions here. The first question comes from Josh, and they asked, do the new herbicides that are being tested available for public overview, or will they go through a NEPA process or an APHIS BRS location? And for that answer, I'll go to JJ.
Thanks for the question, Josh. So the answer to the new herbicide that's being tested is yes, it definitely goes through a NEPA process. All new herbicides go through an extensive NEPA analysis. This particular one has already been approved for use on National Park Service lands and other public lands. And it's just now, and I don't even think it's started, but will soon be tested on BLM lands. But it's been approved throughout the country and in other landscapes for this use.
Great, thanks. We do have another question from Peter, and they asked, will this be a living map where data is updated over time as areas are restored and other areas emerge, e.g. new burned areas, as priority areas for restoration? And for that, we'll go to Boris.
Yeah, thank you. A good question. And the answer is yes. Yes, we will do this. It is a dynamic map. It's a dynamic tool that we will update not only for burned areas, wildfires, but also when new data becomes available. Let's say if the desert tortoise habitat, critical habitat map is updated, all these will be updated, and we consider this to be a dynamic living document. Thank you for the question. Good question.
All right, so we have again reached the bottom of our queue for the questions. Again, I'll just give it another minute or so for folks to add in their last questions here before we move on to our public input period. All right, and we do have another question from Josh, and they ask, would the new rules of stacked traits of genetic engineering that are deregulated with USDA/APHIS be allowed to be used? Can I request that only native seed be used? And for the answer in that, I'll go to JJ.
So Josh, I'll focus on the second part of that question. The answer is yes, you can definitely request that native seed be used because that's what we use. And I'll ask if somebody, I think on here, Corey, could you send to the chat the link to our national seed strategy? That's what we adhere to as we're doing restoration work with native plants. We focus on locally adapted native seeds for growing out plants to use in restoration, or seeds that live nearby in similar conditions, plants that are nearby in similar growing conditions, but they're all native. Nothing genetically engineered or otherwise altered. Thank you.
All right, and we have again reached the end of our queue. We will give it another minute or so to allow any last questions before we move on to our public input session. Alrighty, we haven't received any other questions, so we'll go ahead and move on to our public input session. I do want to note that if you do provide any more questions into the Q&A chat box, they do have the ability to chat back to you. So we can still get some answers to you that way. And again, any unanswered questions will be provided on the virtual public meeting website following this meeting with updated answers to those. So please feel free to continue to use that Q&A feature, but we'll go ahead and move on to our public input session. Input will be accepted in the order that participants registered for this meeting. So we will display the names of those registered participants who are next in line. When you hear your name called, please use the raised hand feature so that we know you are ready to offer your input. You can access the raised hand feature by clicking on the participants list icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You will then be able to access the raised hand feature from there. Again, you might need to toggle your mouse back and forth a bit across the bottom of your screen for that toolbar to pop up. And you may also need to exit out of your full screen Zoom view to see that icon. So once you have your hand raised, we will allow you to unmute yourself and you will receive a prompt on your screen to unmute. After you have provided your input, we'll place you back on mute and lower your hand. If your audio is not working, you may need to check that your unmute button on your side is clicked on, or respond to any pop-up messages you've received on your computer about unmuting your microphone. You may also need to confirm that your device has microphone capabilities. Again, for any technical issues, you can chat directly to our Zoom technician using the chat icon at the bottom of your screen. Before providing your input, please introduce yourself and state whether you are representing an organization or group this evening. You will have about 2 minutes to speak, and this is so we can ensure that everyone has a chance to provide input if they would like to. Should there be more time after the initial round of speakers, those who did not finish providing their input may be invited back to finish providing it. When providing your input, please be respectful of others and their viewpoints. We will also not be tolerating the use of profanity this evening. If you do not follow these guidelines, you will be muted and we will move on to the next person. If you don't feel that you are able to complete your verbal public input today, we do encourage you to submit the remainder of your input in writing. Also to note, some registrants might have already had their questions answered and dropped off. We will still go through the list of registered speakers, but if they are not on the line, we'll move forward quickly to make sure everyone who is here has the opportunity to speak. All right, go on to the next slide there. Great, so our first commenter this evening is Jana. Jana, if you want to go ahead and raise your hand. And I actually do not see them on our participants list this evening. So we'll go ahead and move on to our next commenter, which is Christian Gerlock. I also do not see Christian. I do not see Diane Krause-Hale either. If you're using another name, potentially another Zoom account, still go ahead and raise your hand. That way we know you'd like to provide your input. We'll just keep going down the list here. We have Jim Stanger, also not on our participants list this evening. How about our last two, Ryan Schweers or Matthew Giltner? All right, so we actually do not have any of those on our call this evening. So if you did not register to provide input, but you would like to provide input, you can go ahead and use that raise hand feature and we'll go ahead and call on you so you can provide your input. All right, looks like first up we have Josh. Josh, I'm going to allow you to unmute yourself. You should get a prompt on your end.
Right, okay. I didn't expect to speak tonight, but I see and thank you for taking the time to explain the situation. Isn't that a tough one when transgenic grass is blown across our desert and starts growing. And that's unfortunate. What do us humans do, when we find ourselves in this area? One is look at, I guess, the overall ecosystem. Sure, the fires are happening, but I live up here on the Virgin River, and it's alive and healthy. So the restoration maps, I'm excited to look at them because I'd like to look at them maybe from the closest road and walk in. But I definitely agree. The original plan of using tamarisk was a bad idea. Sure, it held the banks, but dang, it's invasive. It grows up. I don't know how we're going to deal with that. It's a tough one. And dialogue does need to be open to start figuring out what does work, because I know plenty of farmers up here that have gotten rid of it right off the Virgin River and been able to set up and grow and make good crops, and their soil seems good. They're making produce. I get the problem, and I want to talk about the use of genetic engineering. I know it's from left field, but genetic engineering is the future. Joe Biden is yelling climate change. And he just asked for $2 trillion. They didn't support it now. He vowed to get it done. And he is, I believe, with the new rules that are allowed through APHIS with deregulated stack traits, has restoration ideas for this. Back to you.
Thanks, Josh. I do want to go ahead and just open it up to the floor to anybody else this evening who would like to provide input. Otherwise, we'll open it up to everybody. Again, you might just have to toggle your mouse around on the screen to have that toolbar pop up at the bottom to go ahead and access that raise hand feature. All right, looks like we have Josh again. Josh, I'll go ahead and allow you to unmute yourself, and you'll have another 2 minutes to provide your input.
Oh, maybe you can at least answer me when we're done with this. If my 2 minutes can go on and on, could I have 20 minutes conversation? Sometimes that's how long it takes to really get perspective on things. In that topic, also contest in the manner of which the meetings go down. I believe I could have had better conversation with some of those people typing the allowed questions that you guys will allow to come up to talk about. I feel like we could have talked story and potentially even broke down the situations. If they had that type of mental thinking, and maybe they could help school me on things. But I'm a man who loves education, and the manner in which I've seen public comments happen recently isn't acceptable. It's not a way of fostering conversation. It's more of a shotgun. Hey, what can you think of right now? And hurry and type because you're about ready to not get answered, and it brings up frustration. You should reanalyze that in your communication processes. But I've written 30, 40 public comments, and communication from federal agencies to the public is well detailed. It would take more than the 2 minutes allowed to conversate to convey that. But I do want to get into the restoration situation that follows us. But I also want to hear from other people. I hope they speak. I appreciate your time, Allie. And there's a lot of tortoises. I have one. She's great.
Great, thanks, Josh. We'll rewind back to another 2 minutes and open it up to the floor if anybody else would like to provide a comment this evening. Again, just go ahead and access that raise hand feature and we'll allow you to provide your comment as well. All right, looks like Josh, you have raised your hand again, so we'll go ahead and give you another 2 minutes.
One minute, but I guess you didn't really state if I could just keep talking, because I'll use this hour and I'll break it down into where if nobody else is coming in, I'll give some of my outlook on today's restoration situation. But if you will at least allow me 10 minutes, I will try to make it as brief as that. And I really do hope to hear from other people. However, it is important business, and that's why I'm spending my time to relay it to you. If you're not aware, open up your Google, whatever, and search APHIS BRS. It'll be a really hard link to find, but recently it'll give you information on their thoughts of how they're going to do restoration. And you guys, maybe you don't even know it, but you're opening up maps to where they're not even going to be BRS sites, which I believe one exists in Gold Butte, if I'm not mistaken. But the BRS sites are for BRS, bio research, something. We'll have to get the acronym, but basically they are performing, and I've heard plenty of private companies, Bill Gates being one of them, heavily with the largest farmland. I mean, I think, yes, he's going after restoration, but he's also going after food. And I hope to convey the message and the importance of designing a system that allows the public to have involvement in the restoration processes that are possibly, if they're not being proposed right now, oh, trust me, they will be. And I'll talk about it a little more. I have plenty notes, and I got plenty 2-minute sections available. And I appreciate your time, Allie, and everyone else listening.
Great, thanks, Josh. I do want to let everyone know that we will just be sticking with this 2-minute increment session, just to allow for everybody to provide input if they would like. So again, you can at any time go ahead and access that raise hand feature, and we will continue with the meeting in that format. All right, looks like we have Josh again raising his hand. I'll go ahead and allow you to unmute, Josh, and you can have another 2 minutes.
All right, thank you, Allie. Really didn't expect to be giving conversation on the topics, but I'm going to try to rewind because I got to relive the past to get you to the future so you can see the mentality of what exists, right? I believe it to be 2015, BLM 2.0 was initiated. You guys read about it. I'm sure everything, I'm sure you went through things and how we're going to break it into 7 new different angles, the soil, the water, all that, whatever. When it came to APHIS-WS, their envisionment is genetic engineering. You can read it on their old mission statement. They changed it because I made comment on it and they changed their mission statement. But when you read things like innovation and I have a whole list of written down, but innovation or science, and a lot of this stuff is getting wound up with major amounts of trillions of dollars. Joe Biden just asked for $2 trillion for restoration. Now I've seen it in the millions, and I mean, they break it up like the Zika virus act and this and that, whatever. They break it up into a couple billions, but trillions, come on now. A lot of that's coming right to this property, I assure you. And I'm not saying it's even the worst idea to do. The problem is they're not recording it. We should be learning. We should document what we're doing and do it transparently and openly. Why is it so hidden? Why is it worded science? And I'll give you a lot in my 30-day comment. I'll give you the links. You check them. You can look at my old BLM 2.0 comments. Back to you.
Thanks, Josh. And I do just want to say thank you for respecting the 2-minute increment period that we are working in. So again, I'm just going to open it up to the floor to allow anybody else, any other participants this evening, to go ahead and use that raise hand feature if you would like to provide input this evening. Alrighty, looks like Josh, you have your hand raised again. I'll go ahead and allow you to unmute, and you'll have another 2 minutes to provide your input.
I'm having technical difficulties, but I don't want you to just disappear. Well, you ran out. So I stopped what I was doing. I'm researching analytics, but it feels like it's a shotgun weapon. You better get to work. And of course, being a public servant, I record everything I do, and that's back on because I couldn't figure out how to get back to you. Okay, now I'm going to access files. I know this. I hope you don't see it as a waste of your time. Public comments, files, organized, APHIS. Let's just go to APHIS. Let's go to public past. I'm going to read you some real data from public comment that I submitted on. I'm in the folder. There it is. Was submitted F1. It's not the PDF version, but I'll work with it because I'm shotgun. Let me look at the date. October 25th, 2001. I had to scroll to the bottom. I don't know my time, so I got to flip back to that screen. 41 seconds, plenty of time. We're re-accessing the open doc. All right. Currently with 4 days left is pushed. Okay, this is in response to a guidance draft for requesting regulatory status review under 7 CRF Part 340. Is given 30 days for public comment. It is the largest genetic engineering deregulation clause buried in it on page that, 20-ish. And let me see the time. I gotta re-present myself. Do you disappear? Can you answer me that if I don't stay talking?
We'll stay open until 8 p.m. when the meeting concludes. Go ahead and put you back on mute. And again, open it up to the floor to anybody else who would like to provide a comment this evening. If you wish to provide input, go ahead and use that raise hand feature on your Zoom toolbar. All right, looks like Josh, you have your hand raised again. I'll go ahead and allow you to unmute yourself and you'll have another 2 minutes.
Sorry about your time, and I'm not going to keep you till 8. I wouldn't have it in me. So we can all go to bed soon. I couldn't find my comments from BLM 2.0 because, as you know, that was the rules. That was what it was. And if you read BLM 2.0, the first thing it says under BLM 2.0 is science. I need to find those notes. Maybe I have 10. I'm going to try to take just less than 10 minutes of your time. I think we can get it past in that. And I really hope I hope there's some integrity left. All right. 3.1. It's talking about how to reform your system. I find it noteworthy because it's transgenetic invasive species that are growing across, the public lands on the old soil and the micro, the microorganisms that are living in the soil and the root system, and it's all so beautiful. And it sucks that humans have already come across and put some whatever. But let's not forget, we've got to be close to 2 minutes. So I got to check that.
All right, thanks again, Josh, for that input. We'll go ahead and put you on mute. I do, again, just want to open up the floor to anybody else who would like to provide a comment this evening. All right, we will go ahead and go to the last slide just to provide the other ways of commenting for this evening, just to go ahead and review for everybody who's on the line. We will, however, go back to our input session and stay on the line and keep comments open until 8 p.m. That way, we're able to hear from everybody this evening. So I'm going to go ahead and quickly turn it over to Boris to just run us through those other ways of providing public input, and then we'll go ahead and go back to the public input session. Boris?
All right, well, thanks for joining us tonight, and thank you for your questions and your input. Please remember that you may submit written input on our website, which is listed here, thetinyurl.com. If you have any problems with the website to provide input, please email us at blm_nv_sndo_restorationmap@blm. Public input is due April 8th, 2022. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Boris. And again, that was just to remind folks of the other ways that they are able to provide public input. So we'll go ahead and go back to the last slide, and we'll resume our public input session. And Josh, I see that you do have your hand raised, so I'm going to go ahead and allow you to unmute, and you'll have another 2 minutes to provide your input.
Dang, I totally thought it was just over, and I didn't get a closing because I do want to keep it simple. I'll try to just manifest the thoughts, put them down as fast as I possibly can, but the current outlook that they're thinking of adopting and the rules that they're already doing with genetic editing and stacked traits. And for any virgineers out there, a trait is something that does something. It stops a fungicide. It's drought resistant. They grabbed a pig intestine and split it like they did with corn, put it in there so the bellies explode of a pest. Good idea. It didn't work out. Still use it. It's ethanol, I guess, but I'm running away. Let me see my time. Still got a minute. The deregulated traits, there's now 2 of them, and they can make a plant, and I'll put it in my public comment, but they can make a genetically engineered plant, and the only thing that it's analyzed on is, did that trait go through CRISPR-Cas9 or, one of the new kind of scissor cutting, efficient things that we've only had. It got its patent in 2012. It's less than 10 years old, and we're writing it off, and then we're allowing it to breed with a counterpart. And this is, so within really quick, somebody could have a forest full of public paid genetic engineering experiment that's not even documented in the way that the rules are written and what you guys are talking about and all the money that's involved in these, the national seed. Back to you, Allie. I'm gonna get back to it if I get more time. Shit, I got.
All right, thanks again, Josh. Again, we will go ahead and open up the floor to anybody who would like to provide a comment this evening. So you can go ahead and access that raise hand feature, and that'll notify us that you would like to provide input. I would also like to remind folks that we are not tolerating the use of profanity this evening, and you will be muted, and we will move on to our next participant if that is the case. All right, and Josh, looks like your hand is raised again, so I'll go ahead and allow you to unmute yourself, and you can go ahead and have another 2 minutes to provide your input.
Thanks, Ellie. Right. I just want to keep the conversation moving, so I'm just going to keep it running. We don't want any dead air. But thanks you didn't even ever cut your camera, Allie. And for that, big old thumbs up. I'd like to have screen so we can face to face-ish. But I just wasted 20 seconds of a public comment on you, Allie. It's just a big right on. Thanks for listening, people. Please Google APHIS -WS. It's a division of Animal Plant Health Inspection Services. It's a wildlife area, and they share the same motto as APHIS does. And if you correlate those two just mission statements at their home website, at their main landing page of that division of APHIS BRS and then APHIS-WS, you will find the innovation and science and all the rules that are completely spelled out in 100% English, what their goal is. And you can listen to good old Vilsack talk about how they're going to change the whole genome of all cattle and across the whole entire nation, and they can do that easily because there's only very few of them, and they're all big corporations. We need to go back to community-based structures is my point. And I'm really, really hoping that every little aspect that has to do with the public lands that I'm involved in looks after my interests and keeps it transparent, and it keeps it open with conversation. Thank you. Back to Allie.
All right, thanks, Josh. Again, we'll just go ahead and open up the floor to anybody who would like to provide comment this evening. You can go ahead and access that raise hand feature at the bottom of your Zoom toolbar, and that will notify us that you would like to provide a comment. Josh, I see that your hand is raised, so I'll go ahead and allow you to unmute yourself, and you can have another 2 minutes to provide your input.
I keep clicking on mute. Maybe we're playing tag. You're it. The time has officially started. I get 2 minutes. Ellie, you need to cut me off. You haven't cut me off yet. You need to say, that's it. Or maybe because the clock's running now, I'm doing better. But I gotta quit wasting time. Let me tell you the current, because I've been following. I put thousands of man hours into following this. And I never wanted it. It was because of BLM 2.0 when it happened in the Grand Canyon Parashant National Monument, where I went to a public meeting that no one went to except for rich people, opals. They knew what they were doing. Anyway, very classy. And started digging into their research. And the guy from part of APHIS led me on that trail. So crazy. The things that they're doing is cool, and it's also bad, but I'll move past that. That's how I got involved. Now that I'm involved, I'm realizing how ridiculous it's been. There's no public overview. I am a very involved person. I watch APHIS incredibly, but I learn from, and thank goodness, and this is my testament to BLM, because they put it on Facebook. I saw it, very few people. And I follow the public lands because I know that they're trying to do restoration projects in the public lands, and I want to be on all the sign up things. And I've signed up everywhere. But guess what brought me here to this place? It was Facebook. It was by 2 people. And I'm thankful that you guys did that outreach to the community. You should even consider hiring a third-party advertiser that focuses on just targeted advertisement of community insight of proposed projects.
All right, thanks, Josh. We'll go ahead and open up the floor again to anybody else who would like to provide input this evening. You can go ahead and do so by accessing that raise hand feature at the bottom of your Zoom toolbar. All right, and looks like Josh, you have your hand raised again, so I will go ahead and allow you to unmute yourself, and you'll have another 2 minutes to provide your input.
I really hope I'm not wasting your time. And I told you 10 minutes, but there's that intermission. So whatever, we'll wrap it up now. I want to tell you what, after BLM 2.0 got rescinded, they still put all the same ideas that are in BLM 2.0. There was science guided, I think, or something science for the main topic. Just Google it. BLM 2.0 2015. And that was for all BLM public land, not just Nevada. Everybody was involved. Federal control. And it was genetic, the rules. And I heard them talking about it in the meetings of how they're going to make drought resistant sagebrush and do all this stuff. So I'm just telling you, please write the rules for the love of God.
Right, and I do just want to remind folks that we do have a no tolerance policy when it comes to inappropriate language used on this meeting tonight. So again, we'll go ahead and open up the floor to anybody who would like to provide a comment. Otherwise, we will go ahead and provide our closing remarks. Thanks. Alrighty, so I'm not seeing any other raised hands this evening, so we'll go ahead and again move on to that last slide of the presentation to provide some closing remarks. So to close us out this evening, I'll hand off the presentation to Boris.
Again, thanks for joining tonight. And thank you for your questions and your comments and your input. Remember that you may submit written input on our website listed here. If you have problems with the website and would like to provide input, please email to blm_nv_sndo_restorationmap@blm.gov. The public input is due April 8th, 2022. Thank you.
Right, and I do just want to remind folks that we do have a no tolerance policy when it comes to inappropriate language used on this meeting tonight. So again, we'll go ahead and open up the floor to anybody who would like to provide a comment. Otherwise, we will go ahead and provide our closing remarks. Thanks. Alrighty, so I'm not seeing any other raised hands this evening, so we'll go ahead and again move on to that last slide of the presentation to provide some closing remarks. So to close us out this evening, I'll hand off the presentation to Boris.
Again, thanks for joining tonight. And thank you for your questions and your comments and your input. Remember that you may submit written input on our website listed here. If you have problems with the website and would like to provide input, please email to blm_nv_sndo_restorationmap@blm.gov. The public input is due April 8th, 2022. Thank you.